Hello, so welcome to another reading vlog. This week, the main thing that I'm going to be reading is The Sunlit Man by Brandon Sanderson. So that's the fourth and last secret project book by Brandon Sanderson. I have the ebook here on my Kindle, and I did start this last night. I read a couple of chapters on my phone because it came through about 7 p.m. last night, my time. I am hoping that I will get the physical book while I'm reading this, but I suspect with shipping times to New Zealand that it probably won't happen, but maybe I can at least open the box up at the end of this vlog. And I will also be reading in this vlog, because I always need an audiobook, Daughter from the Dark, by Marina and Sergey Dyachenko, who are the authors of Vita Nostra. To be honest, since I filmed my TBR at the start of September, because this was meant to be on my September TBR, since I filmed that, I've forgotten what this is about, but I kind of want to go into it blind, because like Vita Nostra was just so strange, and no synopsis could really do it justice anyway. So I think I'll go in blind, and we'll just enjoy the weirdness that I'm expecting. But let me tell you a little bit about my thoughts of the first 2 chapters of The Sunlit Man. I am going to pull up my notes. Oh yeah, so firstly, The Sunlit Man is like a Stormlight Archive Cosmere story, so set in Brandon Sanderson's bigger Cosmere. There has actually already been callbacks to Warbreaker, so I guess it has some relation to that, even though I was expecting it to have more Stormlight connections, so I guess who knows what I'm expecting going into this. But primarily we're following this man named Nomad, who seems to like skip into a new location, onto a new world, and then he has to build up the power again to be able to skip again, and he's constantly wanting to skip to keep ahead of the Nightmare Brigade who are trying to track him down. Don't know who they are yet. It is true, I haven't read Rhythm of War, and I haven't read Mistborn Era 2, so I'm not like fully caught up on the Cosmere, but hopefully that won't damage my understanding too much. I think most of the secret project books are designed so that you can just read them without the Cosmere knowledge, but when you know it, you get more of the clues. So right at the beginning, Nomad, did I say that was his name? Nomad is his name, and he mentioned that he's kind of aiming for like 2,000 breath equivalent units. So breaths is the magic system used in Warbreaker, and when I read Warbreaker, I actually have it right here because I read it last month and I'm about to film my wrap up. But in the back of Warbreaker, there's a little table of the different abilities, and it kind of talks about how many breaths you need to get certain abilities. And when I read that, I said I wasn't that excited about a magic system that was based on the metric system. And so when Nomad said, you know, I need about 2,000, and I also don't get certain abilities until I get 1,000, and then him and this like companion he has, which I assume is some kind of like Spren companion. Anyway, that's a link to the Stormlight Archives. But this companion of his, it's kind of like a voice in his head, was talking about like what percentage he's at. Honestly, I don't want percentages or the metric system in my magic system, so I'm not enjoying that aspect, and I'm a little bit worried that that's the direction the Cosmere is going in, to be honest. And then as well, like the first scene, there's quite a big action thing going on because Nomad's just appeared in this world, and it's this world where the sun is really strong, and the people of the world basically constantly are traveling around the world to keep away from the sun. And so right at the beginning he's landed right where the sun is rising, and so he needs to escape. So there's a lot of action going on, but at the same time the action is kind of disrupted by all these quite heavy, I thought, explanations of the magic system and the world. And I wonder though if it felt really heavy because if you've already read a lot of Cosmere stuff, you'll already know a lot of this stuff that's being explained, or if it really just, like, I just felt that it was distracting from the action as well. You know, I didn't like Secret Project 2, and I haven't liked some of Brandon Sanderson's humor lately, like Yumi and the Nightmare Painter, Secret Project 3. I really loved that, but I hated the Hoid parts because of the humor that was being employed, and I just feel like a little bit of that tone is in this too, and I feel like it's because that's the kind of writing that Brandon Sanderson enjoys doing. But do I enjoy reading it? I don't know. I'm hoping that like what I want from this is the epic fantasy part and like the magic and just like the human struggles to be at the center of the story. Is that what I'm gonna get? I don't know. There is a part where there's these people that have like these big embers in their chests, and their chests are kind of like burnt open, and you can see like their rib cage showing through, and that sounded so cool. And I expect the special edition books will have some really amazing art related to that, but was it explained in a way that I felt like really got the concept across in an amazing way? I don't know, I feel like it could have been better. Maybe my standards are just unrealistically high. But actually, I think the bit that annoys me the most, actually, I highlighted it on my phone. The bit that was annoying me the most was, can't talk and navigate my phone at the same time. The bit that annoyed me the most was this like assistant voice in his head, friend, companion, whatever it is. It's called Auxiliary, which for starters, I don't like that name. And the way it talks to him, maybe I'll just read the first time that it talks to him. It's like this. It's your torment, the knight helpfully observes to his moderately capable squire. It has grown strong enough to deny you weapons. So it's like Auxiliary is calling himself the knight, but he calls himself like different things every time. And he's calling Nomad the squire, moderately capable squire. But again, he calls them different things every time, and I think it's meant to be kind of quirky, but it's just not the tone that really appeals to me. And to be honest, when I first read it, I was a little bit confused. I am actually noticing as I flick through some other things that annoyed me. He used the word diaphanous. I saw him use the word diaphanous, I think in Warbreaker actually, and whereas I'm forever going to associate the word diaphanous with Robert Jordan and The Wheel of Time, which I didn't enjoy, and so just that word puts me off now. Anyway, despite all those complaints, I am trying to go into this with like hope, but not like too many expectations. I really want to enjoy this one. So fingers crossed. Okay, so last night I did manage to get up to 20% of the way through The Sunlit Man. I'm now at the end of chapter 9, and I'm a little bit worried about what I've just seen at the beginning of chapter 10, but I guess we'll live with it. So with this book, we've had a lot of action scenes, and to be honest, the action isn't my favorite. What has happened all the way so far in this book has really got me comparing it to The Frugal Wizard's Guide to Surviving Medieval England, so the second Secret Project book. I just think like very similarly, we have a character in a strange world who's somewhat disconnected from the other people in the world because they come from a different place. And I think that disconnection really hurts the story. It makes all these other characters feel like incomplete or like not fully developed characters. And these other characters are having this really epic problem, and their world is really interesting, and maybe their characters are interesting, but we're not really getting any of that because we're just in Nomad's head, or in The Frugal Wizard with that guy, I can't even remember his name, Jason? I like some parts of it, but overall I didn't really like it, and I'm a bit worried The Sunlit Man is going the same way. I feel like, actually a little bit how I felt with Yumi and the Nightmare Painter, where I think the story would have been better if it didn't have Hoyd in it. I think the story would be better if it didn't have Nomad in it, and we were just getting these characters who are trying to save their sister and save the world, find a safe place in the world. Who really knows exactly what's going on, because Nomad is off on his own personal dramas that aren't even properly explained. And I just feel like Brandon Sanderson himself is so enamored with his Cosmere characters that he wants to write those characters having adventures, but I actually just want the adventures that the people who are on these worlds are having. But still, I think I could enjoy The Sunlit Man, and maybe I still will, but when you compare it to like Tress and Yumi and the Nightmare Painter, which are, I think, definitely the better two books of the Secret Project books, and I think most people would agree with that. In those ones, the main characters have so much more of a connection with the world and with other characters. Like with Tress, straight away you see her connection with her family and with Charlie, and the adventure that she's going on really means something to her. Same with Yumi and the Nightmare Painter. So Yumi and Painter have this connection, but they also have like other people in their world that they're connected to, and they each have a purpose, whereas Nomad is just kind of out for himself, trying to save himself. What is his purpose really? And same with in The Frugal Wizard, he didn't really remember anything, so did he have a purpose? No. I think I just really like stories where the characters have a purpose, and this isn't giving it to me yet, and it's kind of edging towards it, that Nomad's going to realize that he wants to do something important in this world, because he is struggling a bit with the man that he's become versus the man he used to be, and how both of those men have their flaws. So maybe, but the thing I just saw in chapter 10 definitely has me worried. And I think as well, I'm just worried that it's going to be action, action, action the whole time and we're not going to get like an emotionally deep story. Anyway, the other thing I have been doing is listening to Daughter from the Dark, and I think I'm about 30% of the way through. I'm a little bit conflicted about it. In the beginning, I was really loving it. Like basically this DJ, he's a radio DJ, but I think he works like as a club DJ in the evenings. He comes across this young girl. He calls her a preteen. I think she's about 11. And then these guys come along that are after her with these dogs. Maybe one of the dogs explodes, so he decides to take her home just to keep her safe. He kind of says he doesn't normally like doing nice things for people, but he decides to do it in this case, and then he ends up regretting it because the next day she's still talking about this man coming to get her, and this man turns up and he's really trying to tell this guy, like, I will take this girl off your hands. It would actually be to your benefit for me to take her away from you, but he says no because he wants to protect her. Then he gets his friend to come around to take this girl away, and the girl starts telling this story about how she's actually his daughter, and his friend believes him and thinks he's kind of a scumbag for trying to get rid of her. And to be honest, what is letting this book down for me a little bit is that he is a scumbag, which from the themes of the book I think it fits, but he is in some ways quite unlikable. Like, his friends don't doubt that this could be his daughter because he is just always sleeping around with women and treating them like throwaway things, and just some of the things he says are quite unlikable. But also, the girl has this soft toy teddy bear. Is it alive? Maybe. Like, is there something strange about this girl? Definitely. She won't tell him anything about herself or where she comes from. It's just a big mystery. But I think as well, like, it's just, in the beginning, it was really good, and it's just not escalating as quickly as I would like it to like utter weirdness, but I hope it will get there. I also wanted to say it does feel a little bit like Haruki Murakami stuff, but like slightly less creepy and with less weird sex stuff like Murakami always seems to have. I wanted to say not creepy, but it has gotten a little bit creepy with some of the things, like the main character had written an article to this macho magazine about the functionality of woman, in which he described a category of woman as the vacuum cleaner. So honestly, like, he's a terrible guy really, but sometimes you also empathize with him because he's trying to do the best thing he can for this girl, but every time he tries it ends up screwing him over. Anyway, I think my favorite part of that book so far was just when this guy was trying to get into his house and he said, "Aren't you sick of all your nonsense by now?" And that's just, I think, a line that's going to stick with me as something to tell myself when I'm being a drama queen. I do think there's some really good lines in this book, similar to Vita Nostra. So I'm really hoping that the rest of the book will go in a direction that keeps it interesting, keeps it weird. Okay, this time my neighbours are water blasting. I swear, it never ends with them. But anyway, I am now halfway through, just past 50% of the way through The Sunlit Man. And to be honest, I've had kind of the feeling that I was getting towards the end, because I feel like in a lot of ways all the solutions have been found. They just kind of need to be executed, and then we'll find out what happens with things. But I guess since we're only 50% of the way through, that there must be more to things, which is what I want. But I'm a little bit worried that it's just going to be all these plans kind of coming to fruition and that's it, but somehow it still takes 200 and something pages, because I'm still not feeling like particularly connected to any of the characters. Oh, actually, I remember last time I was telling you I'd seen something at the beginning of chapter 10 that I was worried about. It turned out that was actually my favorite part, which doesn't sound like me at all. We got a little bit of Hoyd, and the conversation there wasn't kind of stupid Hoyd. It was more like Hoyd as a real person, and Nomad and Hoyd actually having some kind of proper connection. But then that finished. It was only like a small part, and then we've gone back to Nomad not really having a connection with any of the other characters and what's going on. And there are some hints of him like building that connection, but it's pretty slow. Oh, what I will also say, so there's a lot in here about the magic. Actually, last night when I was reading this, I went to sleep and I had a lot of very strange dreams. I think my brain was trying to come up with some kind of new magic system. I'm not sure that's the kind of dreams that I wanted to be having after reading this, but it's very heavy in the magic, and I wish that I had read, what's it called? Shadows of Silence in the Forests of Hell, because that short story, I think maybe it's a novella, I think that is very relevant to to what's happening in the story. And as well, I'm pretty sure that things that happen in Rhythm of War, which I haven't read, also the short story Dawn Shard, and possibly Mistborn Era 2, like I'm pretty sure that all those things are relevant to this book, and I kind of wish I'd read all of those before I'd read this. And I can't even imagine actually going into this as your first Cosmere book. Like really, I wouldn't recommend that at all. So I think probably when I get to the end of my Cosmere reread / Cosmere catch-up, I will probably reread this book. And maybe at that point it'll have like a slightly different meaning to me, but I still think I will be disappointed with the lack of like character connections. So then as well, I have been listening to Daughter from the Dark, and I am up to, let me check, 63% of the way through. So I don't have that much longer to go, only have 4 hours. That's a lot, actually. But this one as well, I'm just really frustrated with the main character because he doesn't really seem to have much purpose. And even when it comes to his problem with this girl basically having moved into his house and causing him a bunch of problems, like he doesn't have any kind of plan. Actually, he has a plan. It's a really stupid plan. And he knows it's a stupid plan. And he kind of like teeters between that stupid plan and just like ignoring all his problems. So that's very frustrating. Also still being a creepy guy in points. Like there was one point where he said, like the Russians saying, if a man doesn't beat you, he doesn't love you. The worst. But there was also another line, the young girl said, creativity can only exist in an imperfect world, which I've been thinking about. But like, surely a world isn't perfect if it can't have creativity. So that's a bit of a paradox, isn't it? Anyway, I think there have been some lines that I've really liked, which I think is the main thing with Vita Nostra as well. But Vita Nostra, I can still appreciate the plot and the weirdness. There are some little pockets of weirdness in this that I am really enjoying, but for the most of it, I feel like it's just going in my head and going out because nothing that's happening is really sticking with me. So I guess we'll see what happens in that last third. Hello, so I am now 80% of the way through The Sunlit Man, so nearly at the end. I will admit, like the last section I read, since 50% to 80%, it's been okay. I found it easy enough to get through, but it's also kind of just been feeling kind of routine, as I expected. Pretty much we're just executing on the solutions that we'd already thought of. And yes, some things have gone wrong along the way, but mostly those things that have gone wrong feel like just problems that have been introduced to give the characters something to do, rather than like genuine problems where there was ever really a risk of things going properly wrong. There's maybe only one problem that was introduced that is a big real problem that I don't know what the solution is, but it's also kind of weird because that was introduced and it seems like a big problem, but then we haven't really mentioned it again, even though surely we should be. And I assume that that's going to be a big piece of the last 20%. There's also another thing that needs to happen, so I guess we'll see. But nothing that's happened has kind of like been a surprise, I guess is what I'm trying to say. But I am hoping for some surprises maybe in the last 20%. I don't know if that's an unrealistic hope. The other thing, just there has been many more references to the Stormlight archives, and I'm really regretting not having completed my reread / catch up of the Stormlight archives before I read this. But I can't change the past. The other thing I did do is I finished listening to the audiobook of Daughter from the Dark, and I didn't love it. I just think like there were some cool ideas, some really great lines. It does something quite interesting at the end with music, but at the same time, like it kind of relies on that trope of like, oh, their string broke, but they keep playing, which I've read a few too many times now to be in love with. But like it was probably quite beautifully written, that part, but just overall, it didn't really go anywhere. The kind of the surprise, the reveal at the very end was not something I appreciated, especially just because our character is such a fuckboy. There is one part where this other woman calls him a shit, and I was like, yes, just smash him, because it kind of got worse and worse, even though I think the book was trying to say that he was learning fathering skills throughout the book. I don't know. There's probably a lot of deeper meaning to this book, but when I read weird books with deeper meaning, I still want the main, like, more obvious plot to be interesting and the weirdness to be interesting, so that then like I'm interested enough to dig into that underlying meaning. Anyway, that's a shame, but I think probably I just went in with unrealistic expectations based on Vita Nostra, which probably wasn't fair. Hello, so I have finished The Sunlit Man, and I would say the ending was pretty satisfying. There was a lot of action, but I mean, it was kind of coming to the climax. Oh, it was okay. I did get a little bit bored in the battles, but like there was also some emotional things in there, and I felt the emotions of it. My eyes maybe even prickled a tiny bit at one point with tears, but also, let's be honest, I cry very easily. But yeah, some nice emotional stuff at the end. The ending was very satisfying. I did find it interesting because it seemed to me like the ending really sets it up for further adventures of Nomad. And then Brandon Sanderson kind of said that there's not really any more books planned, but that Nomad as a character will be in the bigger Cosmere, so who knows. As well, what happened is in the last 25%, we started getting some chapters from the perspective of one of the characters from this world. And honestly, I really believe that should have been introduced way earlier, especially like this character has kind of had control of their mind taken away from them and they have to gain it back. And it would have been really interesting to see like that right from the beginning when they have absolutely no control to them slowly gaining it. Like I would have loved to see some chapters from them when they were like totally feral and then actually see like the proper progression of it coming together. And I think I said earlier, like I would have liked the story better if it had been a story of the people from the world, even though there were a lot of extra Cosmere things in it that meant that Nomad perspective was adding things. But also like, please, if you haven't read this book and you haven't read much of the Stormlight Archives, you really shouldn't read this book. And again, it makes sense at the end. Brandon talks about how this is a book written for all the people who have been following along with his journey the whole time, people who probably have read all the Cosmere books, but honestly, who can keep up with that? Not me, and I read a lot. Although I guess I could have if I hadn't decided to go back and do a whole reread thing. Anyway, I guess I'm glad that I read this when it was new and had just come out, but at the same time, I wish I had finished my reread and my catch-up so that I could have read it in its proper place. Because I really think you want to have read Elantris, you want to have read Mistborn, you want to have read Warbreaker. I'm pretty sure, even though I haven't read it, that you want to have read Mistborn Era 2. And you just... so much of this I don't think would make sense if you haven't read any of the Stormlight Archives, and it kind of spoils things for the Stormlight Archives if you haven't read it. And I just don't think I saw any warning of that before I picked it up. However, I probably would have ignored it if there was one. But overall, I think my ordering of the Secret Project books stands as kind of what I said at the beginning, Frugal Wizard being the worst, then The Sunlit Man. Then I feel like on a different day, I would either prefer Tress or Yumi and the Nightmare Painter. If it wasn't for Hoyd, Yumi and the Nightmare Painter would be first, but Hoyd maybe brings it down under Tress, but Hoyd was in Tress as well. And he was in this. Hoyd, he's not my favourite. Anyway, I do not yet have even a shipping notification for my physical copy of the book, so I kind of expect that it won't arrive by the time I'm going to publish this video, but there is maybe a week's delay before I put this up, even though if I was a proper booktuber I'd get it up straight away, but that's not how my schedule works. Anyway, if I get the book before I publish this, I will insert here an unboxing. If not, I'll put that up at some point in the future. So subscribe if you'd like to see more of my bookish videos, and let me know if you've read The Sunlit Man, and let's chat about it down in the comments. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching. I hope that you are doing well, and I will see you next time.